Hey guys, I'm Danny Wesleski, and today I'm going to be going over Andragogy, which is the adult learning theory developed by Malcolm Knowles. So let's get into this. Andragogy is the equivalent to pedagogy, which a lot of you guys have probably heard, which is youth learning. Andragogy is exactly like pedagogy, except for it is for adult learners. So meaning it's the method and practice of teaching, the relationship between applied linguistics and language. But to break it down, andragogy is the science of adult learning. Now, to understand adult learning, we have to know these assumptions. So there are 5 total. We'll write these out and go into them in more detail here in just a second. So all of these assumptions are characteristics of adult learners that separate adult learners from youth learners. So the first one is self-concept. Like I said, we'll go into these in more detail just here in a second. So that's the first assumption, self-concept. The second is adult learner experience. So experience plays a key role. The third assumption is readiness to learn. So readiness and willingness to learn. The fourth is orientation of learning. So we'll just say orientation. And this fifth assumption didn't come around until 1984, so 4 years after the first 4 assumptions, but it's the motivation to learn. Now, as I said, these assumptions are characteristics that make adult learners, adult learners. So let's look into these more in detail. So when we look at self-concept, this is the transformation from formal operational cognitive development to adulthood conceptual thinking, where adults start having abstract thoughts, deductive reasoning, and they use logic. So that's number 1 for the assumptions. The second assumption is adult learner experience. So with maturity, an individual gathers memorable experiences that build up to an enhanced resource for learning. So experience to adults is one of the richest resources that may reside from what they've gone through. The difference between youth learners and adult learners when it comes to experience is that youth experience is something that happens to them, whereas adults, their experience makes them who they are, it becomes a part of them, and that's why it can become a rich resource. All right, the third assumption is readiness to learn. So when you look at youth, a lot of times they aren't, motivated and self-orientated towards learning. But with adult learners, readiness to learn is a key assumption. As a person matures, their readiness to learn becomes self-orientated increasingly, and it becomes orientated towards developmental tasks or like social roles. Adults become ready to learn those things that they need to know or that they can use effectively within real life situations. So that's the third assumption. Let's go down to the fourth assumption. That's the orientation of learning. As a person matures, their time perspective changes from one of deferred application of knowledge to immediacy of application, meaning they want immediate results. They want to see immediate relevance. Children are subject-centered, orientated to learning. Adults are life-centered, task, problem-centered to their orientation of learning. They're motivated to learn to the extent that their learning will help them perform tasks. All right, so that's fourth assumption. The fifth assumption, the last one, is the motivation to learn. So this is self-explanatory, but it's as a person matures, the motivation to learn becomes internal and self-driven. They want to learn for themselves. They want to gain more knowledge for some self-need, satisfaction, self-esteem, quality of life, etc. So once we have these 5 assumptions down, we need to look at the 4 principles of andragogy, okay? First one is adults need to be involved in the planning and evaluation of their instruction. So let's say involvement. Okay? They need to be actively participating. The second is experience. Experience is listed here as well because experience really does drive the learning experience for adults. It provides the basis for learning activities. The third principle is adults are most interested in learning subjects that have immediate relevance. So we need to do like real-world application, immediacy. So they need something that's relevant to their job or personal life, something that they will immediately gain. So we'll say immediate relevance. And the last principle of andragogy is adult learning is problem-centered rather than content-orientated. So rather than lecturing and or reading a book or getting facts, adult learning is problem-centered. So adult learners learn more effectively when they're actually physically problem-solving something or using physical activity, just actively participating. So we're going to say problem-centered learning. So what does all this mean? How do we tie it all together? What's the point, right? So we want to look at real-world application. Let's look at how we can teach adults. Like, what do we need for it? What's different about teaching youth than teaching adults? Why is it important? These are all very important questions that hopefully this will help you answer. So, and what do they need? They need a justification for the things that they are being taught. Adults need to understand why something is being taught or how it's going to be useful. So that's one, justification. And sorry, we're going over needs of adult learners. So the first one is justification for what they're learning. The second is instruction needs to be task-orientated and include hands-on involvement. So we're going to say active participation. Like we said earlier, experience means a lot for adult learners. Active participation, their experience plays a heavy role in that. All right, the third real-world application need is consideration of diverse backgrounds. So when teaching adult learners, we need to be well aware that they all come from different backgrounds, maybe different ethnicities, different cultures, different learning experiences, different raisings, etc. So consider diverse backgrounds. Okay, and then we have number 4 here. Learners need to discover things for themselves. Instructors can be there to guide them, but not to actually instruct or direct them. Adult learners need to problem solve and figure things out on their own. So what we're going to say here is learners need to discover things. So discovery, self-discovery. Basic needs for adult learners. If you have all those techniques, then teaching adults should be relatively easy. Let's go into these a little bit more in detail though. Justification. There is a need for explaining and reasoning behind why subjects are being taught. I like to know why I'm learning something just as much as the next person. Second thing, active participation. Instruction should be task-orientated instead of promoting memorization. Learning activities need to be in the context of common tasks to be performed by others versus just directing someone to read a book or do a math problem set. Again, adults are here to problem solve and learn for themselves. They need a challenge. Third thing here, we need to consider diverse backgrounds. So instruction should always take into account the wide range of different backgrounds of learners. Learning materials and activities should allow for different levels, types of previous experience, maybe with computers or with different dialogues, etc. But diversity always needs to be considered in any classroom. The fourth and last thing, self-discovery. So instruction should allow learners to discover things and knowledge for themselves without depending on other people to tell them what they need to know. However, learners should be offered guidance and help when mistakes are made. That way they can problem solve and work around it. So why is andragogy specifically important within agricultural extension education? Well, think about it. What is extension? It is educating others. And in order to do that effectively, we need to understand how to teach and effectively reach different audiences. In this case, adult learners. So it's relevant to extension because extension is really only relevant as long as individuals see a need for it. Extension is a resource, and it becomes not a resource when people don't have a need for it anymore. So we gotta keep it relevant. In order to understand the potential of extension, we must be effective educators. Educators need to understand their target audiences and the best way to reach them effectively in order to have meaningful learning. Knowles' theory of andragogy describes adult learners and the principal assumptions that coincide with the most effective learning environment for adults. By utilizing Knowles' theory, educators and extension agents can effectively reach their audiences and convey their message. They can do that effectively and immediately, with the goal of providing meaningful, well-researched, and unbiased information. So I hope you got something about andragogy, the adult learning theory, and thank you.